Dudes and dudettes, how are you guys? This is Chazzy and welcome back to the Mixer, the segment on this channel that's probably your guys' favorite by now because it's the one where I can most, how can I say, give you variety, talk about stuff from all walks of life, world cultures and biology and science and art, and music. Speaking of music, today's topic is actually going to be encompassing that, and before that, you guys might be wondering, why am I wearing a hoodie and a beanie today? It's because it is cold as hell. It's been really cold in Sao Paulo this whole week, man, and these last few days it's been so freaking cold that I couldn't even fathom the idea of recording YouTube videos. I could barely get out of bed in the morning to go to work, man. It's been freaking crazy, but today it's a little better. There's a bit of sunlight, and I'm in a good mood, so I'm about to do videos and record stuff here, but seriously, man, Sao Paulo's getting ridiculous to live in, man. It's way too cold. I mean, it's making me come to the conclusion that I don't belong here. We gotta move on, dear. Escape from this afterlife, cause it's time, alright. Okay, I'm sorry for that moment of utter cringeness there, but it's just to give you guys a little hint of what's to come today. I'm gonna be talking about one of my favorite bands of all time, Avenged Sevenfold, a name that is very interesting because the band is not religious at all. They barely ever talk about religion, at least not too positively, and yet their name comes from the name of Their name comes from a book in the Bible, Genesis 4:24. That's actually the story of Cain and Abel, and that specific verse says, if Cain is avenged sevenfold, then Lamech 77fold, it's talking about vengeance and stuff, so that's where it comes from. It's actually a very good name, that actually seems pretty synonymous with the band today, and it's funny because they don't really preach religion. They are essentially a heavy metal band, although their music has actually, really oscillated over the years. They've done heavy metal, but in the early years, it was a lot of metalcore, and their second album took elements from like thrash, melodic death metal, that kind of stuff, and they've experimented with hard rock, alternative metal, and they have recently tried to branch into progressive metal, but it hasn't really been very well embraced in my opinion, but I'm going to be talking about that as I get to dissecting each one of their albums, In case you guys don't know how these videos work, I talk about the bands that I like in a way, and I show you guys clips and stuff. Like the last one that I did was here talking about Evanescence. This was like last year, This was between my 7th and 700th video, my 600th and 700th videos. So yeah, it's been a good minute. So anyway, Avenged Sevenfold was actually formed in Huntington Beach, California in 1999, and the Avenged Sevenfold that we know and love today is synonymous with 5 specific band members, which is M. Shadows on lead vocals, Sinister Gates on lead guitar and also backing vocals. Then we have Zachy Vengeance on rhythm guitar and also backing vocals, Then there's Johnny Christ, bass guitar and backing vocals as well. Pretty much everybody does backing vocals, right? Except for Jimmy Sullivan, also known as the Rev, who was the drummer until he died in 2009. He was actually kind of like the co-vocalist, because he did actually contribute a lot to some vocal tracks. He was essentially a backing vocalist as well, but there are certain songs where he completely is the one who actually does the entirety of the vocals, and they have evolved a lot. They've gone from very aggressive growling guttural screams to completely clean vocals. Matt, who's the vocalist, actually did a lot of work over the years, so he wouldn't screw up his voice, and I really enjoyed their music. I like their legacy, and I'm going to be talking a little bit about their history, but before that, let's take a look here at a clip from their very early days, or maybe even some photos from when they were really young, huh? Pretty cringy, huh? I know. I know, it's really hard to look at. Freaking Matt, man, as a pipsqueak, and today he's all buff and stuff. He's huge, he's like 40, and he's freaking a monster. But anyway, so their very first outing, you know, when they put out their first album, they were a foursome, you know. It was M Shadows, Zachy Vengeance, Justin Sane, whose real name was Justin Miacham, you know, on as a bassist. Then we have the Rev, you know. And the thing is that Justin had come on to replace this guy named Matt Wendt, who had actually gone off to college, so he couldn't dedicate himself to the band, you know. And they released their very first album called Sounding the Seventh Trumpet, you know, in 2001. And this is a reference to the Bible as well, you know, from the book of Revelation, that talks about how the seventh trumpet will sound and will bring about the end of the world, you know. And it is a metalcore album through and through, you know. It's very hard to listen to because I've never been a fan of metalcore, so it's not like the best album in the world to me, you know. It's not even the best in their lineup. It's probably the worst in my opinion, you know. And it had just one single, which was Warmness on the Soul, you know. And fun fact, Matt Shadows' future wife, you know, her name is Valerie, Valerie Di Benedito, something like that, you know, his the eventual Valerie Shadows. You see what I did there? She actually contributed guest vocals to The Art of Subconscious Illusion, you know, so it was a very strange album, man. There's like maybe like 2 or 3 songs at most that are listenable in that thing, you know. It's really, really cringy. And unfortunately, sometime after that, Justin attempted suicide by drinking excess amounts of cough syrup, you know, so that actually caused a rift in the band, you know, because he had permified his brain and he was in a mental institution for a long time, so they obviously needed somebody else to fill his place, you know. And Matt later talked about it and said that this is not a good environment for a band, you know. It's really hard to even be around this kind of person, let alone try to work with them. So unfortunately, he was dismissed from the band after that, you know. And then subsequently, they brought in Johnny Christ, you know. I'm going to talk about later why they took on these stage names. That's going to be towards the end, but they each have their own stage name, and there is a reason for that, you know. And so Sound of the Seventh Trumpet really freaking sucked. I didn't like it at all, not one bit. It was way too cringy for me, you know. I don't even want to address it too much here, you know. But 2 years later, they would actually release what is one of my most favorite albums, you know, which is Waking the Fallen in 2003. And this is where their music started to take a different direction, you know. It was still considered primarily a metalcore album, you know, but the songs were a lot different, you know, because now there were cleaner vocals. You could actually understand what Matt was saying, you know, because he was singing a lot more. And this is actually I talked about Johnny Christ, but they actually had brought in Sinister Gates as the new lead guitarist, you know, so it was no longer Zachy Vengeance playing lead guitar. He moved on to rhythm guitar, so Sinister could be the lead guitarist, you know. And it's actually kind of funny, their history, because apparently Sinister and the Rev, they had known each other since they were kids, you know. Sinister's real name is Brian, and the Rev's is Jimmy, so they actually knew each other in school. I guess they got into a little scuffle while they were trying to sharpen their pencils, and then they were both sent to, I think, either thank you asshole truck driver. They were both either sent to detention or the principal's office, and Jimmy was wearing a hat that said, I think, a drum club or something. So then he said it's because he played drums. Then Ryan said, really? Wow, well, I play the guitar. That's cool. And they kind of started to bond over that. You may not have known this, but the guys in Avenged Sevenfold are very close. They were all friends before the band became the thing, but the 2 closest ones were always, you know, Brian and Jimmy, you know, Sinister and Rev, you know. They were always the closest because they were kind of like enemies before the band took off, you know. So when the Rev died, you know, when Jimmy died, I don't know whether I call these guys by their real names or by their stage names, you know, because they don't like it when you use their real names. But I'm a fan, so I kind of feel like I'm close to them, so I use their real names. But anyway, when the Rev died in 2009, clearly Sinister took it the hardest, you know. It was tough. It was tough. But anyway, so getting back to Waking the Fallen, this was the first full-length release with Sinister on guitar and Johnny on bass, you know. And it was actually really nice, you know, and they eventually went on to remaster it and release it again, you know. I think it was really nice because they started to have different Matt started to use more high-pitched vocals, you know, and there were a lot more guitar solos, so it really did sound like a heavy metal album, but some of the songs were way too heavy. We're talking like 7, 8, even about 10 minutes or so I think the guitar solos really contributed to that, you know. So there was a higher pitch and higher notes in the vocal range, so it was really nice, you know. And even though there were some elements of punk rock there, you know, it leads away from punk rock and more towards heavy metal, but there are still elements of melodic death metal and a little bit of thrash and power metal too, you know, so it's all over the place. I really enjoyed this album. So let's take a look now at another clip of them, maybe playing live, maybe from around this same time if I can find one. Alrighty, that was cool. I'm glad you guys took the time to headbang to that one there, because now we're gonna get to the one that I most want to talk about. 2 years after the release of that last album, which only had one single, you know, now we had the monolithic City of Evil in 2005, and this is the album that put Avenged Sevenfold on the map and catapulted them into mainstream popularity, you know. This is the album that made the world know who Avenged Sevenfold was, you know. They had pretty much completely abandoned their metalcore roots, and now this album had a very much heavier take on heavy metal itself and hard rock, and also a bit of alternative as well. Like, they played a little bit of alternative metal, so this album was much more radio friendly, but still had the need and grit of a heavy metal album, you know. And M. Shaw has actually worked for months with vocal coach Ron Anderson, who actually had clients like Axl Rose and Chris Cornell before him, you know, to try to bring his voice a little bit down, like still have the same tone, the same power, but like not exactly the same you know, like that kind of weird grit, you know. It still had the grit, you know, like it had grit, but also kept a better tone, so he wouldn't force his voice so much, you know. The album is pretty much completely devoid of growled and screamed vocals, you know, so Matt pretty much keeps a clean voice throughout, you know, so not as high pitched as before, you know, and there was a notable difference, you can tell. And of course, the Rev was a freaking monster on this album, buddy. I mean, he was practicing for hours and hours every day until he could get up to like 210 beats per minute, you know. This guy was freaking crazy, you know. This was honestly Avenged Sevenfold at their finest, and there were so many good singles, man. The name of the album itself comes from the first track, which is Beast and the Harlot, you know. A few other notable songs, you know, we have Bad Country, which was, I think, their most popular one. There was Seize the Day, you know, and there was also, what was it? Burn It Down. There was Burn It Down, you know. And one of my personal favorites is Betrayed, which actually the subject matter dealt with the shooting of Dimebag Darrell from the band Pantera. He was shot and killed by a fan, you know. So I do believe he was on stage when it happened. So that song is kind of like an indirect tribute to him, you know. There's MIA, which is Missing in Action. Very, very long song. Some of these were way too freaking long, man, you know, but I still really liked it a lot. You know, I really enjoyed this album. This could very well be my favorite Avenged album. I think it's unanimous in the A7X, their abbreviation, right? The A7X community, that this is their best album. It's not my personal favorite, but it is their best, you know. My personal favorite, it comes a few years later. I'm going to talk about that in a bit. So I think that this here was really what propelled them onto the map, you know. This is what made Avenged Sevenfold be Avenged Sevenfold. And here I'm going to read for you guys some of the stuff that happened, you know. Two of their singles were certified gold by the RIAA, you know, and eventually it was certified as a platinum record by the same, you know. It went over to sell 2,500,000 copies worldwide, you know, and it was also the best-selling album out of their discography as of 2020, so 2 years ago. To this day, it's still their best-selling album. Nothing that they have done has ever even come close, you know, and it's really not surprising. Those songs were amazing, dude, and a few other things as well, you know, but that's just, it was ranked as, wow, it was ranked as number... Okay, hold on. Let me take this in parts, right? It was ranked number 63 in Guitar World's... Okay, you know what? This is gonna get too confusing. Forget this. It was a good album, okay? It was well received, all right? And to me, this was... by this time, the band's chemistry had flourished, you know? Because all of them had been playing together since the second album. So now they had really captured what it was like to make a heavy metal album. And to me, this was an amazing show of power. You know, this was just incredible, and I love this album so much, man, you know, and it's a really good album, you know, and in my opinion, it doesn't really compare too well to their next one, you know, which was the self-titled in 2007 called Avenged Sevenfold, you know. It was nice, you know, again, 2 years after the last one, and I did enjoy this album, but at the same time, I don't think that it captured the raw grittiness of their previous one, you know. I think it was like, I mean, they kind of took out the alternative and it was just like heavy metal and hard rock, you know, and there were some really good singles. I actually did like the album a lot, you know. There were some of the singles were critical acclaim: Almost Easy, Afterlife, Dear God, and Scream. Afterlife became one of their most popular songs ever, you know. I think it's like a staple in their live shows at this point. They pretty much play Afterlife with the most amount of frequency, you know, and I did really like this album. Let me make it clear, I love this album, you know. It didn't really feel like heavy metal. It did feel more like they were taking on like a hard rock approach, you know, which was nice, you know. It's not easy to go from metal to rock, you know, and they embraced it really well. Their songs were very radio friendly, except for A Little Piece of Heaven. That one there was just a bit controversial, you know, and I do believe that actually let me just confirm that here, you know, because of the subject matter of it, you know, talking about butchering a girl and stuff, you know. Here we go. Warner Bros. Only released it to registered MVI users over the web, you know, so it wasn't like publicized on the TV or anything, you know. Like, there is a music video that you can watch on YouTube, you know. I'm gonna leave a link to it here, but beware, guys. Beware, it's very violent and bloody, you know. I can't watch it, I can't stomach it. The thumbnail alone is tough, you know, but if you think you've got the stomach for it, just go ahead and watch it, okay? But they talk about like freaking cutting a girl up and stuff. It's weird. In the recording studio, they were actually messing around. I don't think this song was meant to be taken seriously, you know. I think that because you can hear the Rev in the background screaming, ah, hot dog, this and that, blah, 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 you know. It's really dumb, but I like it a lot because it showed that Avenged Sevenfold were still around, you know. They had a much more mature sound than a few years prior. So this to me was a very good continuation of City of Evil, you know. However, it would unfortunately be the last album that the Rev would participate in because he would tragically pass away in 2009, just 2 years after that. And I'm going to be getting into that in the next part after this next clip here. Now, I think much of the success of the previous album, you know, the self-titled, was because the band was trying to go in different directions, you know. They were embracing different musical, how can I say, endeavors, you know. Aside from the hard rock and heavy metal, they did experiment with a little bit of symphonic rock and experimental music and even a little bit of country, you know. There was a lot to be had in that album there, you know. But they began working on their next one, which I think it was supposed to be released in 2009, you know, and it was gonna be very dark and almost kind of evil, you know. It was some very deep and personal stuff that they were working on, you know. I do believe it was M Shadows, you know, who actually said that it was supposed to be, you know, the most personal and deep stuff that was going to be very epic and take you on a dark journey, you know. And dark it was. Dark indeed it was, because in 2009 the Rev was found dead in his home, you know, and the autopsy reports were inconclusive, but it was ruled out as an accidental overdose, not of drugs per se, but prescription drugs, you know, different kinds of medicine in his system, you know. And apparently he died in his sleep, you know. He didn't even feel it, and it was very strange because they were working on their album, you know, and there are a few songs that were left there intact, you know, but even though it's not a concept album, it does revolve around the Rev, you know. And it's funny because there are a few songs that are very scary when you think about it. There's one called Fiction that he himself wrote, and I believe he is the sole vocalist for that song there, you know. And then like he handed it in, and I think it was the very final song for the album before it was ready to be released, you know. So he turned it in and he said, okay, that's it, no more. That's the final song for the album. And 3 days after that, he died. So I think that was actually, it doesn't really seem to be much of a coincidence. That was actually really scary. And now the dogs are barking again. So anyway, the thing is that after this, you know, Mike Portnoy from Dream Theater actually came in to help them finish recording their drums, you know, and he went on tour with them in support of their new album Nightmare, released in 2010 with, it's actually funny because all of the songs, you know, just ignore the dogs in the background. My neighbors are coming in, so they're barking. So I don't want to stop now. I'm on a roll here. I don't want to stop, okay? So then the Reb's vocals and his drum contributions were completely they were completely full and with very clear quality, so they were able to use them as if he was still alive, you know. He did contribute to some tracks, you know. In the previous album he did a little bit of a critical acclaim with M Shadows, you know, and in this one here he actually did, I think, perform a lot more. It's actually very strange because it's like there was a song there called So Far Away, which Sinister had written about his grandfather, but understandably it became about Jimmy, you know. Just like when Chester Bennington from Linkin Park took his own life, the song One More Light became about him, you know. So when they did So Far Away, when they made the music video for it, you know, it was a tribute to Jimmy, you know. You saw clips of him and characterizations of the band members when they were kids growing up together, you know. It's really freaking sad, man. That song almost makes me cry even when I listen to it today, you know. And I began listening to Avenged years after he died, and it still hit me, you know. So imagine people who were actually there, you know, when he was still alive and active, you know. It's really freaking hard. But yeah, that's just the way it is, man. God, Jimmy. So anyway, back to Nightmare. This went back to their roots in the heavy metal genre, you know. There was pretty much no rock at all. I considered the album to be very heavy on the metal side, you know. There were a few parts that were written by Jimmy, and the album cover has a tombstone that says Forever, you know, with an emphasis on Rev right there in the middle for Rev as a tribute to Jimmy, you know. Very good album. The very first song that I ever heard by Avenged Sevenfold was Nightmare from this album, you know, and it was the first album of theirs that I went into and listened to all the way, so I really liked it a lot. And by the way, this is my actual favorite Avenged Sevenfold album. Like I said earlier, you know, City of Evil is the best, no comparison. But Nightmare is my personal favorite because of how influential it is to me, and it's the one that introduced me to them, you know. And because of the subject matter revolving around Jimmy's death, you know, I think that it's just a very powerful message, and I don't really want to say anything else about it because I'm just getting too sad, man. So before we move on, let's take a look at a clip here, possibly the last one showing Jimmy alive or not. I don't know what I'm gonna get. Okay, so after the tragedy that was the death of Jimmy, you know, and man, the band members really took it hard, you know. They actually, it took them a while to find a replacement. Actually, no, they didn't. It took a year. What am I saying? It took just a year. But I imagine that in that year, it was pretty complicated for them, you know, to find somebody. They settled on Arid Ilije, who I think was kind of an unknown at the time. He doesn't really, I don't think he's done work with other bands. I don't know, guys. I know nothing about this bastard, okay? I just know that he got together with them, and it's really strange when you saw a photo of them together back then because they were working to create a new album, you know, at that point, you know, and like all of the band members are predominantly white, you know, covered with tattoos and always kind of, they're a little buff and with tight shirts, you know. And then came this Bruno Mars looking mofo, you know, with not a single tattoo on his body, thin, scrawny, you know, like tussed up hair. It just looked really weird, you know. But anyway, in 2013 they would release their next album called Hail to the King, which M Shadows said that the intention here was to try to create something a bit more like blues oriented, like a blues rock influenced, you know, kind of similar to the old school, like Led Zeppelin and Black Sabbath, you know. That's what the idea was. They wanted to go for a more classic rock and metal album, and I think they nailed it. They hit it out of the park, you know. They really nailed it, in my opinion. I actually thought it was really impressive, you know, but it's also not my favorite album. It's not really up there because like there were only two singles, Hail to the King and Shepherd of Fire, and there was so much hype because after becoming a fan, this was the first album of theirs that I was going to watch come out live and actually listen to it in real time with everyone else, you know, and it was okay, man. It was the first one without any contributions from the ref, so it was fully the new drummer, you know, and there was even a song dedicated to Jimmy, you know, which was St. James, and it's a very nice one, you know. It starts off by saying, this is the story of a man who conquered life, beer drink in hand, you know. A very nice song, I really like it. A good send-off to the Revster, that's what I call him, you know. So musically, it was actually very oriented towards groove, you know, like there was a little bit of groove metal in it, you know, and there were actually a lot of really good reviews, but I think Kerrang! Magazine is the one that said that it's like I don't know, it's not really, I don't know, man. I don't know what Kerrang! Said, you know, but in my opinion, it was nice because they tried to embrace the classic, you know. This was like, I mean, Sinister Gates, when I'd say that sonically, it's the best thing that they've ever released, because when you turn this album on, it just blasts your head off, you know, and they did take a lot of elements from the old school metal, you know, so there's even a little bit of avant-garde there somewhere, almost like the old days of Pinkly Smooth before the Rev joined Avenged, you know, so to me, it was pretty okay. Not like, I mean, it's nice if you want to jam to something, you know. They do try to harker back to the classics, but it didn't really do it for me, you know. I didn't really enjoy it too much, and there are a few good songs. The main single, Hail to the King, is the best one in my opinion, but it doesn't really carry the whole album. You know, there were a few nice guitar riffs by Sinister, you know, some pounding drums by Aaron, but overall, it's really not anything. I'm trying to maybe grab something here that can be positive about it in my little cheat sheet, but it's not here, you know. There is a little bit of a thrash metal sound. There are elements there with some fast and mid-paced tempos, you know. There's some distorted, you know, guitars, and they do talk about like war, religious intolerance, and corruption, you know, things of the sort, but in the end, it's really not that impressive to me. What was even less impressive was what they released 3 years later, you know, The Stage in 2016. I really did not like this album at all, man. I actually don't even know what I can say about it, you know, because this pretty much abandoned completely their roots, everything that they've done before, because they really tried to make something a little more, like I said earlier in the video, they tried to get into the territory of progressive metal, and they just did not embrace it that well at all, you know. The two singles, The Stage and Goddamn, were just very, there's even this thing here, you know. Oh yeah, by the way, I forgot to tell you that at one point they actually changed the drummer. They got, I think they fired her and they brought in Brooks Wackerman, who had played drums in Bad Religion, the band from 2001 to 2015. So they brought him in as the replacement. So this album had contributions entirely by him, you know. Described as very aggro style, you know, almost a little bit avant-garde kind of thing, you know. And I don't know, man. Even the album's title, even the album's cover, if you look at it, it's just like a freaking, I'm looking at it right now, it's like a nebula. It's ugly as hell. Then the deluxe version is the nebula with the colors inverted, man. Like, what the freaking hell, you know? But anyway, it's a concept album, so it deals specifically with a certain theme, which in this case was artificial intelligence and the self-destruction of society, all that stuff, you know? It's their longest album compared to City of Evil, which is, the album is their longest and also has their longest song ever, which is Exist, which has 15 freaking minutes, and I'm not gonna listen to that crap again. I think I listened to it the first time when it was like in the background, you know. So this one, to me, there was something else that I had highlighted here, guys, but I don't know where it went. I don't know where it is now, so I will probably never find it again because I'm running out of time here. So yeah, I don't know what it is, you know. But I don't know, man. It's just a very strange album, you know. I don't know. I just know that the former drummer left because of creative differences and everything was all messed up, you know. I don't even want to talk too much about The Stage because it sucked and I only listened to it once and didn't like it, so I have nothing to say here. All I know is that it was very, very strange, you know. It was Avenged Sevenfold pulling a Tokyo hotel and doing something so out of their comfort zone that it was ridiculous, okay? That's not cool, man. Get off the stage, okay? It's just... Okay, one more final clip, if I even have clips to show at this point, or maybe some photos, I don't know, before I finish this off. think the one good thing about that last album was like in the song Exist, which is 15 minutes long, you know, there was an audio snippet by Neil deGrasse Tyson that was actually recorded specifically for that, you know. Everything else sucked, man. I know they tried to experiment with more progressive stuff, you know. There were bass instruments, and I do believe the instruments were dropped down to D minor, some of them, you know. There is some songs here, you know, they wanted to give the chorus and the solos a unique sound, but it ultimately did not convince me no matter what I'm reading about here, because I don't understand too much about music, so I'm reading directly from the cheat, because I'm a cheater, a dirty, filthy cheater. Before I finish, I promised you guys a little bit of the origins behind their names, right? Matt Shadows calls himself this because his name is Matt Sanders, right? So he went with Shadows because he always identified himself as like the darkest member of the group, you know. Sinister Gates, Brian calls himself this because allegedly he was driving with a friend, I think one of the band members at one point, but he was a little drunk, and then he saw some really dark and spooky gates and thought they looked sinister. That's how he got his name from. Then we have Zachy Vengeance because he's a very vengeful bastard. You know, he always wants to seek revenge on those who have wronged him. He's a very spiteful bastard, so that's why he calls himself this. And Johnny Christ, his last name is literally Christ, just to piss people off, you know, namely religious people. I don't really care. Let the guy call himself whatever he wants, you know, but there's nothing really there behind the origins, you know. The Rev is the most mysterious one, you know. His full stage name is the Reverend Tholomew Plague. Nobody knows why. I don't think even the band members knew why. Like, he literally took this to his grave, man. Nobody knows why he chose this long ass name for his stage name, you know. But then again, I don't know, man. It was the freaking Rev, you know. This guy was crazy. And look, guys, I have to go because this video, just the recording time alone is 35 minutes, okay? I've been sitting here in this chair for 35 minutes. The sun is going down. I gotta get me some coffee, and I still gotta edit this damn thing and export it to post it tomorrow. I don't even know where I'm going to begin doing all of that, but I'm going to end it here. And also, I see there that my battery is low, so I got to finish, okay? Let me know in the comments below if you're a death bat like me, if you're a fan of the band, you know, what song got you into them, what you thought about this long-ass mini documentary at this point. And that's it for today, man, okay? Hail to the king, all right? If you guys happen to like this video, please go ahead and give it a like, and also subscribe to my channel because I release videos every single day. And while you're at it, please hit the notification bell. God, hit the damn notification bell, I beg of you, so you can know exactly what time I upload, because I've been trying to give you guys one video per day. So yeah, and that's it, man. God, I'm so tired. This is Chazzy signing out for now, and as always, I will see you guys in the next video. Roll the outro screen.